On behalf of the Linn-Mar Board of Directors, I welcome everyone here this evening, and I call the meeting to order at this time. I would like you to please roll call to determine a quorum.
Director Buchholz?
Here.
Director Foss?
Here.
Director Mansour?
Here.
Director Maury?
Here.
Director Thomas?
Here.
Director Walker?
Here.
President Lau Lancaster?
Here. At this time, we will do the adoption of our agenda, please. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I have Laura and Britt. Is all in
Let me
favor?
clarify who was the motion and who was the second, please.
It was Laura, then,
was first.
oh, Britt, then Laura. Thank you. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, say no. The motion carries. Item number 300, audience communication. At this time, I will call those who have signed up to speak to the microphone in the order that you signed up. The board will receive and acknowledge your comments. We will not engage in the dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda. Your remarks will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and we should these comments should be shared in a respectful manner. At this time, I have Gretchen, who will be our first speaker.
Good evening, board. My name is Gretchen Lawyer, and I am a supporter community member, and also I am a member of the Marion Alliance for Racial Equity. And I'm here to ask you to stand up tonight to vote down the motion to disband the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. You can do both what is right and what is legal by not taking action to disband the district's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This committee was originally organized to help ensure that the school district does everything that you are required to do, both by moral imperative and by federal law, including at minimum the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the Civil Rights Act. We understand that this proposal to disband the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is a rapid response to the executive orders and Dear Colleague letters recently sent to school districts across the country by the federal administration. However, no executive order or Dear Colleague letter or guidance can overrule a federal law or regulation. Besides, a federal judge has already largely blocked these executive orders, so there is no need for the district to take preemptive action like this one. Even more importantly, it's also critical to be very clear that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has done nothing that would be deemed unlawful by what is outlined in the executive orders or the Dear Colleague letter. Nothing. It is important to understand that the executive order in question is very similar to House File 802, which was passed into law by the Iowa legislature in 2021. To my knowledge, Linn-Mar has not engaged in anything that would be considered unlawful according to House File 802 since 2021. It should be very easy for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to continue to ensure they do not take action that would be in violation of state or federal law. We must stand strong against any overcorrection, or as a colleague in Cedar Rapids called it, self-censorship. It seems like disbanding the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee would serve to protect the district, but not the students that the district is sworn to protect. In the Linn-Mar district, equity means giving every child what they need, every child, every day. Please vote down the motion to disband the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Thank you.
Our second speaker is Vanessa.
Hello, Vanessa Reno, parent and chair of the Education Committee on the Marion Alliance for Racial Equity. I am speaking tonight to urge you to retain the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This committee, which is still in its infancy and which has been doing good and important work, must be able to continue its work. I encourage you to recognize that the advice of attorneys often can lead you to take preemptive, overcorrective measures to do everything possible to avoid a lawsuit. However, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has not done and will not be doing anything that would open up the district to a lawsuit. Mayor would not support anyone taking actions that would be deemed discriminatory under the Federal Civil Rights Act. You already have the protection you need from lawsuits. Please retain the committee. that was formed to ensure you are doing all you can to meet the requirements of your own district policies, state and federal laws, and what is best for kids. In my opinion, what is best for students always trumps what a district might want to do in the name of caution. On the name placards before you is the guiding question: what's best for the students? Voting no on a motion to disband this committee is what's best for the students. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We'll move on now to item number 400, Mission Moment. Does someone have something that they would like to share?
Okay. So I attended the sock hop at Bowman Woods on Friday. I served a lot of soda to a lot of kids. It was so cute seeing kids from kindergarten all the way to 4th grade coming up and politely requesting soda. And then I also got an opportunity to talk to the PTO chair and the PTO members. And Bowman Woods is in need of PTO volunteers. So please, 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 if you are a Bowman Wood parent, if you're a Bowman Wood grandparent, when I signed up with my husband, there was only 3 people who had signed up. This is 3 days before the sock hop event. So we need people to help with all of these amazing activities that we set up in different schools. And it's not only Bowman Woods, I'm getting emails from other schools too that they're looking for volunteers. So there's also one more thing. So Linn-Mar Post-Prom Committee is looking for donation for raffle prizes. It could be a monetary donation, or it could be like a certificate, or if there's business owners in the community and they want to donate, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have? Laura?
I wanted to highlight an academic event that Linn-Mar had a great presence at on Saturday. There was a chapter math counts competition that was hosted at Hazel Point. We had teams from the middle school buildings, and new this year there was a team from the intermediate buildings as well. In addition, there were schools represented from the Marion homeschool, and then I think there were 2 Cedar Rapids schools as well. And our kiddos did great. Several of them placed in the top 10, and will be going to state. And Oak Ridge was the number 1 team, so they'll be going to state as well. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the smart math kids.
Thank you. Justin?
I was at an event, this was 2 Saturdays ago in the morning as the kids were getting picked up from one of the schools, and in talking to the bus drivers, I quickly learned that I think all but 2 bus drivers we have employed were out working that Saturday morning. And so as we think about our teachers, our coaches, our bus drivers, we think about maybe a 5-day work week, they're putting in much more than that. And it goes noticed, it is appreciated. And the bus drivers, they were just happy to do it. They were excited to see the smiles on the kids' faces at Saturday morning at 6:30 in the morning. So we've got great staff, and so just talking to the bus drivers, they were appreciative. They were excited to kind of be a part of it. They like it. That's what they've signed up for. So just to recognize that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. At this time, we'll go to item number 501, our preliminary fiscal year 26 certified budget report.
Thank you, Katie. So we're going to run through our certified budget update. This isn't our full budget presentation as normal, but this is really regarding our tax rate and then the notice that will get sent out to the public. So topics for this are: what's the purpose, what is our timeline, what are the key factors, and what is our preliminary estimate. So the purpose of this is to establish our maximum tax rate. So this would set what our highest tax rate could be. We can always come down from there. Right now, obviously, we don't know what SSA is. That hasn't been set yet by the legislature, so there's a bit of an unknown of what that's going to be, and that really flows into the formula that then does establish our maximum tax rate. We want to communicate that to our public, and then to inform on the FY26 line item budget process. So the timeline. Code says that we have to have by 4 p.m. on March 5th our maximum tax rate sent to our county auditor. From there, they compile our information, our city's information, and the county's information into a mailer that gets sent out to all citizens. March 13th, we'll publish our first hearing date in the Gazette and on our district webpage and our district-controlled social media. On March 31st, we'll hold that first budget hearing. April 5th, we'll finalize our property tax levies and the proposed budget. April 13th, we'll publish that notice for our second public hearing in the Gazette and on the district webpage and social medias. April 28th, at our board meeting, we'll hold our second budget hearing, and the board will then take action on our budget for fiscal year 26. And then prior to April 30th, we need to file that budget paperwork with the Iowa Department of Management and the county auditor. So key factors, so those are the funds and the levy rates that make up our overall levy rate. So our general fund would propose to be at $13.53, our management at 99 cents, our regular PEPL at 33 cents, our voted PEPL at $1.34, our plural at 13.5 cents, and our debt service at $1.72. So on the right there, you can see who makes the decisions for those tax levies. So 45.29% of that is made up by the state funding formula. The voters control 18.36% of that, and then the board makes up the other 36%. So this is what the preliminary estimate looks like. I apologize that that's pretty small on the screen, but trying to get that to fit on one page was a bit of a challenge. So this is very similar to what will come in the mailer for the school district's portion of it. And what this does is it compares what our current year tax dollars are to what our proposed tax dollars are, and then the rates that go with that. The other thing that they do is on the bottom of that is the property tax comparison. Now this has changed from what it was last year, and this was a statutory change that we have to comply with. Is last year they were comparing a $100,000 house this year with this year's rollback to a $100,000 house next year with next year's rollback. What they changed this year is they increased what next year's valuations were. So we're comparing this year's $100,000 house for that same house next year being valued at $110,000. They've done the same with the commercial properties. This year the valuation comparison is $300,000 versus a $330,000 comparable. So we don't have control of that. That's set by the state for what that comparison is. Everybody is in a unique situation from property to property. Some valuations go up, some go down, some stay relatively the same. So I think the state said we need to do something here to do this. As a reminder to everybody, it's not a reevaluation year. So generally property taxes in non-reevaluation years don't increase as much as in reevaluation years, and that's done every 2 years. So then it gives you the comparison of what that is. I will also add that the rollback percentage this year did increase a couple percentage points from what it was last year. And again, that's set by the state. That's not set by the district. So we'll have a couple more dates that we'll go through this. The one slide that I'm really missing right now is what that mailing looks like. We don't have that yet because it's not out. We have to have the information to the county auditor by March 5th, and then they have to mail those by the 15th. So the next two dates that we do a very similar presentation, we'll actually have a copy of what that looks like, so we'll be able to explain a little bit more of what's in there. So to try to educate our public on that, because I do know that it is confusing and it's new. This is the second year of this process, so trying to do our part to educate our public, so hopefully there's an understanding of what is that letter that they are getting in the mail. Questions, discussion?
I just want to clarify, like you said, it's a new process. So understanding we have to propose the highest rate now because we don't know SSA. we can move it down. So the community needs to understand what is being proposed on this right now is not the final. We make that decision in April once we have the state's decisions on SSA and things like that. So I know it can be concerning whenever you talk about property taxes, and to just note that we can go lower than this, we just can't go higher. So planning, being fiscally responsible, John has set a rate that will get us where we need to go if SSA doesn't come in. When SSA comes in, we will then look at this and make a final decision.
Thanks, Britt. Yep, that is 100% correct. We're allowing ourselves a little bit of flexibility since there is the unknowns, since the state legislature has not met their 30-day requirement.
John, did you say that, sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Go for it.
John, did you say that there was going to be a 10% increase on property valuations built in?
Yep, so it's a 10% valuation for their comparison. Now, your property taxes may or may not do that, but that's the comparison that we're required to show within that mailer.
Even though the properties are not being assessed this year, they may still change, and so that's why that's being included. Is that accurate?
I believe that's probably the state's goal, so yeah, to the best of my knowledge, that's why that's in there. But understand that everybody's property is unique to themselves, and those valuations don't change at a set percentage.
John, I had two things. What was the date by which the legislature was supposed to have that decision? Do we know?
It's 30 days after the governor announces that, so I don't know
February
that date off the
13th.
top of my head, but
February.
we've passed that.
Okay, so the legislature, again, this is several years in a row now, has not met their deadline to do that. Just to mark that for folks to be aware. As they ask us questions, it's because the legislature has not done their job. Second question is, in that sheet that you had there, one of them that we know gets confusing is the, if we didn't change the tax rate, if we didn't change anything in the amount of cash that we get in, what the tax rate would do. And we all know that inflation exists. And so that number does not contemplate inflation. Is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Okay, so it does not compare to much. Okay, thank you.
It also doesn't factor in the reality of employees expect to get a raise every year to combat the inflation and cost of living changes, and it's not fiscally responsible. It's not sound strategy for staff retention and recruitment to say we can get by with exactly what we had last year and you're not going to get a raise. That's not how we take care of our people. That's not how we take care of our facilities, and that's not being fiscally responsible. So appreciating and understanding how inflation and all of that works into budget calculations.
And John, I just want to comment on this slide that's up here right now. Last year was the first year we received this, and it wasn't very clear. This year they're trying to modify it a bit, and I'm not sure what they're trying to accomplish with it, because it adds more questions than it does answers. So everybody will be receiving this, and we probably will be fielding calls, but that all fits kind of right into it. So.
Yep, and I will add, last year, I believe on the back page at the very bottom, there was a website you could go to that had an FAQ. That does explain some of it. So for the public that's here or listening, if you guys do see that, go to that website, and I believe that will provide at least some clarity, more than just seeing that for face value.
So just as a numbers perspective, our budget for FY25 was $48,198,000.
So not our budget, that was the levy dollars
Property
that we
tax,
received.
yes, sorry.
Yep.
That was for 2025, the property tax budget, right? And levy.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the proposed levy that we are proposing is going to be 49.6 million.
Correct.
Okay.
I think as we're closing up, one thing that we noted in 2024, and that you've addressed this, is the ability for us to actually read what's presented to us in the mail is different than questioning the the work that you've done to prepare a budget. It's sometimes we don't understand how we fit in our household. And I think last year you spent a lot of time just explaining the form, not necessarily your presentation as the documentation. So knowing that we need to be part of communication and educating, we want to make sure we make ourselves available in that, because that was the glitch. I would say that night, the comments were not about our budget. It was, I can't read this form, and how do I fit into that?
Yep, correct. And the phone calls I received was more on what is this, and trying to explain some of the city and the county side of stuff too. So that's really the reason for this, is to try to be proactive and educate the public to the best of our ability.
John, I got one more question, sorry. Just as people are watching this on the replay at home, I'm assuming that this question will come up just in the third column, right? If you look at the very bottom, the bottom two rows, it talks about, actual assessed value, and then 100,000, and then it changes to 110,000. So even if the numbers going into it were the same, the form is making us use different values of homes. Is that a change that we make, or is that something that the state has forced into the calculation to make the numbers different?
Yep, that's what the state has forced into these calculations. So last year you were comparing 100,000 to 100,000. This year you're comparing a $100,000 house to a $110,000 house for next year.
And do we know why the state did that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
John, thank you for the presentation. One more thing, can you share the couple of opportunities that folks can hear a recap of the presentation or the presentation in its entirety?
Yep, so March 26th, we'll have a Lion learning session that will be on this specifically. And then at the March 31st board meeting, we'll actually have two meetings. We'll have our regular meeting where we will recap this. We'll adjourn and then open the new meeting that is the public hearing that is specifically around our property tax rate.
Thank you very much. I don't believe we have any more comments or questions for you. Thank you for your presentation and your work. At this time, we have item number 502, Linn County Conference Board Report. Barry Buckholz.
Okay, so everybody seems to think that this meeting is a pretty minor meeting. This is a report that I have to go through when I get ready for it. I just want to tell you that right now, so it's not easy. But serving on the Linn County Conference Board, also serving on the City of Cedar Rapids Conference Board at the same time, the first thing we do is we approve the 2026 budget. The second thing, just for informational purposes, there's a school board member on this board from every school district in the county. There's also the county supervisors are involved. All of the mayors from all of the communities in Linn County are involved in this as well. So it's kind of an interesting dialogue, but as we talk through it, and John rolled right into it, because a couple facts that are kind of interesting to me. We went through a pretty high growth real estate value era in the last 4 to 5 years. I think it slowed down. But in 2019, all of the real estate in Cedar Rapids was $10.3 billion. As of 2024, it's 13.6. So the good news, the bad news. The good news is our homes are going up in value. The bad news is taxes follow that. The second item on that list was there's a shortage of assessors, either county assessors, city assessors. Some people might think that's a good thing. So basically, Britt played right into this a few minutes ago too, is there had to be a fair number of raises in the city. So when you go through the budgets, you go through all of those numbers. So some of the assessors got as high as a 9 to 10% increase in salary. Kind of how they set those salaries, some folks might say that's not fair, whatever it is. But they went around all of the communities in the state of Iowa that compared to Cedar Rapids, compared to comparable sizes, to try to keep yourself up to that level, because just like anybody else, they're trying to poach those assessors from Cedar Rapids, and then when you hire a new one, that takes quite a while to get them up to speed. So that was all part of the budget, and a number of salaries had to go up as well. The interesting thing is a majority of the assessors today are not going to come to your home. They're going to assess your properties. They can go on Map 360, whatever the app is that they're going to use. They can look at your house in pretty good detail if they want to, sitting at their desk. what we had in this booklet I just showed you, there were 300 people, 310 I think it was, folks that challenged their taxes, all the way down to businesses, all the way down to people. Anybody can challenge their taxes. Feel free to do that. Then you go into the office and you kind of plead your case to a commission or whatever that is. So as crazy as it sounds, I enjoy this discussion. This is fun talking about these numbers, but when I start looking at some of the companies or organizations that try to get their taxes lowered, I get a little bit frustrated. But it's just all part of the process as a community. So those are all just interesting dialogues. So we did approve the two budgets for this going into this next year, even though there has to be a public hearing first. That's probably more than you wanted to know, but you asked me to give you a report. So.
Well, I appreciate that very much on behalf of the community. You gave us lots to think about. We're going to move on now to item number 503, our Finance Audit Committee report.
Okay, so as we walk through this report, John already we had a very good meeting this last week. John took the first item off of the list. The second one is, and we'll be approving this later on in the session today, bids that came in for Excelsior roof replacement. And kind of an interesting factor, all the bids came in under budget, under projections, which is a good thing. One thing that did happen is we did roughly raise $2 a square foot to get, instead of 60 mil roof, a 90 mil roof. And what that really means is we do have a 30-year roof guarantee now, which is kind of an interesting process finally. We're finally getting to that point. Second item is we're going to have recommendations about a new scoreboard at the football complex, or at the sports complex, better rephrase that. And so that's moving along forward, so we can have that ready to go by midsummer, middle to late summer. So all of that process will come through as well. Basically, the scoreboard has outlived its life. We talked about the indoor activity center, and Superintendent Kortmeyer will touch on that in her report. And then also what John put together, this was a request at the last meeting, was do we have a 10-year plan update? What that means is when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to facilities upgrades, when it comes to wish lists for each building or whatever that is. So John has put together a 10-year projection on what this would cost, what we project that is going to cost us, and to show that we are keeping up with our facilities. So go ahead, John.
Thanks, Barry. So yeah, like Barry said, there was some questions around what's our 10-year plan look like as we were talking about the indoor activity center, and how can we fund this? What else needs to be done? What needs to be funded? So I've made a lot of assumptions within this because we need to start kind of somewhere to see what we can realize and what we can't realize. So just know that none of this is final. This is a draft. This is a starting point that we'll probably go through a few iterations on, but wanted to start somewhere to show what possibilities are. So what I did is I split our three capital improvement funds out into kind of their own table of charts, and the revenues that would flow in, and then the expenses that would come from that. So the one on the screen now is our SAVE fund, and remember that's in the Secure and Advanced Vision for Education Fund. The 1 cent sales tax, known as the penny tax, used to be SILO. So the assumptions in this is an annual growth in the sales tax receipts at 1.5%, and then a steady enrollment. I believe the 10 and 15-year average is somewhere between 2 and 3% in the annual growth of sales tax. So conservative there, conservative that our enrollment stays steady over that same time. So you'll see that very conservative estimates on the revenue side, and maybe optimistic on the expense side, so to make sure that our cash flow does stay there. And this is something we'll update year by year to know what we look like year by year. So a few highlights on this is if you, 1, 2, 3, the fourth row down, you'll see less anticipated capital projects. So in that, we've had some feedback on some things that we believe need to be done, and I really think this is the line that then highlights the question of what else can or can't we do if we do fund the indoor activity center. So you'll see there that there's $16 million in other projects. Those haven't been defined 100%, but there are line items in there for some of those projects. So those things include spaces like updates to libraries and bathrooms, HVAC systems, updates to entrances and restrooms, and then a few other smaller projects. Another page here, this is for our PEPL, Physical Plant and Equipment Levy. Again, doesn't look a whole lot different than the last page, other than what some of the expenses and the revenues are. This assumes a 3% annual growth in our district property valuations, and that's on the conservative side for what we've seen in the past 5 to 10 years as well. Some highlights here is our capital projects. So those capital projects are kind of our ongoing maintenance needs, really including things like our roofing projects. So the project that's on the agenda today, that would come out of that PEPL capital projects line item. Tuck pointing, property updates, so repairs and replacement to our concrete and asphalt, interior needs, furniture needs, whiteboards, those sorts of things. Some small remodeling projects, updates to our lighting system. So that's really what would make up that capital project fund. The rest of these are really things that we've been using PEPL for, at least for the last 4 to 5 years, if not even longer than that. Our annual maintenance, so think of that as our break fix. Operations gets a work order and says, hey, this isn't working, come fix it. What funds that? That fund there. Some technology expenses, our facility rentals, safety and security, that's a new one. If we remember back to when this was passed, that was a big question that came from our public. How are we going to keep up with our safety and security needs? So we have a line item for $100,000 per year for that. Our O&M equipment purchases, so plow trucks, salters, sanders, mowers, snow blowers, et cetera, for them, line item in there. And then the transfer to the debt service. So if you remember when we said we had the ability to fund our indoor activities 2 ways, this is showing one of those ways split between PEPL and SAVE. So that's that line item. Again, that's an assumption on my part, but we need to start somewhere. That can be adjusted as we work through the future of that project. Then lastly, our PERL, so our Public Education and Recreation Levy. Again, same type of chart here. Operation and maintenance expenses, that's for our upkeep on our playgrounds and our parking lots. Really the highlight here as far as projects is our playground improvements. So this shows at least $150,000. That grows by 3% per year to invest in our playgrounds across the districts. That can be anything from new equipment, additional equipment, playground soft surfacing. We haven't gotten to that level of detail of the where and the what yet. We can get there, but really addressing those items and even the items in the PEPL funds on an annual basis, we would like to take that evaluation to say where's our highest need for this next year and be able to address those on a year-by-year basis, but still be committed to spending those funds on those types of projects for the next 10 years. Questions, comments?
First, John, thank you for the work that you put into this. This is amazing. This is really valuable when we talked through it at the facilities committee meeting here. For the board members that weren't at that meeting, as John alluded to here, what we're showing is that we have taken care of our side of the house. And so this is voter-controlled money. This is stuff that is either through the sales tax or the PEPL or the PERL, so stuff that we know that we have control over, and for our facilities, and to make sure that the buildings that we have for our kids serve their needs, they're safe and everything, and that we as a board have continued to make sure that we're taking care of our side of the house, and that we have the cash to do this, to make sure that the buildings that the voters have asked us to provide are there, and they're in a good, safe shape for our students. So this is very good. Thank you, John.
John, I have a question for you. On both the PERL and the PEPL, if we were, once our current PEPL percentages that we have already voted in for property tax rates expires, what year would that impact our revenue that you have projected out?
Yep, great question. So on the PEPAL form here, this is showing the next 10 years, which is the length of our term. So this is showing up till the point that we have revenue. So in 2035, June of 2035, our current PEPAL levy would expire. So this shows until the sunset of our current levy.
Is that for the same for Pearl as well?
Nope. So Pearl, last year in the legislature, the laws around Pearl changed that you could no longer levy for a Pearl tax. But Pearl's unique in the fact that once you have it, you don't lose it. So Pearl will go on for perpetuity unless there's a legislative change around that.
Okay, thank you.
I have,
Along that same line, SAVE is voted through 2050, so all of these projections include SAVE revenue through 2051. That is legislatively already passed.
I have a question, John. So in the Pearl section, you have projected about 154 and growing thousand for the playground improvements. And what we had heard in the past that those soft surfaces, just to replace the soft surfaces, was around 350,000 per playground. Can you just expand on that? Because you mentioned soft surfaces, so I just want to make sure that that's covered.
Yep, absolutely. So obviously this is a starting point. I think the first thing I'll highlight here is that if we want to go further and invest more in those playgrounds, that's obviously a board decision. The very bottom line there really shows what our carryover is from year to year. So you can see 10 years from now, we would accumulate a cash balance of 1.2 million. So if the board would elect to invest more money in those playgrounds, there is some funds there to do that, number one. Number two, if we look at the amount of playgrounds that we have in the district, we have our 7 elementaries and our 2 intermediates. We've updated one. We'll update another one this year in 24-25, so that's not shown here. So it could be a possibility where we need to combine a couple years' budgets in order to get those done. But again, that's up to the board. So there is some flexibility here, and I really want to reiterate that this was a starting point. What I did for that line item is look back at the past and what had been done historically for playgrounds and what had been allocated. And originally that was $140,000. So I've just added 3% to that from the beginning to get us to where we are now. So there's some flexibility there if that's the board decision to do that.
So what you're saying is we're not axing like the soft surface. It could be a board decision in the future to approve it and to go on with that.
Yep, I would say we would want to look at that at a project by project basis. That $350,000, that's kind of a little bit of an arbitrary number based on the size of the playground and the area that has that surface, obviously. So there's some things that we could potentially do there.
Playgrounds are also typically, I know, John, you want to speak to the partnership aspect of playgrounds and how those are, PTOs have a lot of input in what goes into those playgrounds and what they want to see as a school. So those projects are really tailored. I'll let you fill in the rest.
Yep, Brett, you're on the right track there. So at least my history here, the PTOs have always helped in, and those are exciting projects for them. So they want to be able to have some say in them, and they also can historically have contributed financially to them, and we're grateful for that. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily an expectation, but they get excited about being involved in that playground process. So
Yeah, and just keep in mind, this is a draft, and this is a wish list. John sat down with all of the principals and got some of their wish lists. Any one of those items could change tomorrow. We know that, so just keep that in mind moving forward. This isn't set in stone.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep,
All the
you're welcome.
clarifications.
Sorry, go ahead.
So actually, what Barry mentioned is what I kind of wanted to talk about. I don't know if it's a question per se, and that is, looking at what, like at the bottom of the PEPAL Fund page, it's talking about the district using several processes to plan and anticipate based on building age and needs, and then feedback from building principals. And I'm worrying, though, that that's not enough to truly capture potential really good building improvements that, I don't know, the kids see, or the parents see, or the teachers see. And just having a single voice. Granted, I appreciate our principals. They're a great voice. But I'm nervous that we might be overlooking some building improvements, and those might be things like better accessibility entrances or bathrooms, like accessible bathrooms or other needs that we might have in those buildings. Or it just might be maybe some facelifts in hallways or in flooring, and they might not be the most exciting of updates or the most, it's not a leaky roof per se, but I think it would really benefit the culture and morale of buildings, because that really goes into the feel and experience of the kids and teachers. And so I guess, if anything, for the Finance Audit Committee, if you could please look at how we can get more input on some of those projects that I fear would be beneficial but might be overlooked.
So one of the things that I appreciated about the feedback, yes, it's a wish list and principals gave feedback, but John also looked at annual expenses that included things like flooring, lighting. I know he mentioned tuck pointing and the roofs and things like that, but making sure that, when we talked, we said, it'd be nice to have a tab on this draft spreadsheet that was like the last time this building got flooring was this year, and then kind of, it wouldn't necessarily dictate when the next building gets the next flooring, but it would give us an idea of how long and how old something is. And then I know one project that was submitted was a greenhouse for the high school. That didn't come from the principal, that was a teacher request. So I think the principals are also, they're not just sitting down after John asks them a question and coming up with it on their own. They're also asking their buildings for input as well. It doesn't negate, maybe there is a step forward that we can expand on that, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that things like the non-exciting projects are part of that maintenance plan that John has built in here, because we asked all those questions in committee.
Yep, and I would add to that, to kind of tag on what Britt was saying there is, this wasn't a solo principles, what do you need, and that's the only thing that's included in here. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, somewhere around $1.4 million, that's right up there, of that is for those repair type projects. And that's where I kind of started to dig in and say, how much a year should we be putting in roof? Should we be putting in flooring? Should we be putting in tuck pointing? Should we be putting in painting? Should we be putting in furniture? About 6 or 7 different categories to come up with that $1.4 million. And then that's what we would evaluate as a team, operations and maintenance, building principals, our facility advisory committee, to say, where should we spend this $200,000 in flooring this year? What has the highest need? What haven't we touched in the longest? What's the size of the building? To try to have a little bit of equity. Obviously, you have a high school that's over twice as large as any other building in our district. So to try to allocate that of $200,000 for the high school and $200,000 for every other building, obviously that doesn't spread out the same way when you're talking about those categories. But those are things that I think we'd be prudent to try to do that on an annual basis, so we know what the highest need is at that point in time. But also looking back and saying, how much money have we invested here, and have we made an investment in any other building in these categories yet?
I do want to appreciate your comment, though, because since we've opened Hazel Point and Boulder Peak, the transition for students from those big, beautiful, super colorful, brand new buildings into older middle schools and the high school, I've heard from students that say, wow, Oak Ridge is not pretty. It's just white. It's not, it's institutional. I've heard the same thing about Excelsior. Now, that's not to say that every student feels that way, but it is something to consider as we update one building. How is that, how is the progression through our buildings looking? So I do appreciate that concept and that idea of, let's make sure that we're looking at what we would call the boring stuff and making sure that that experience is consistent. And I think that that is worth a conversation.
I have one more question, actually 2 more questions. So right now we have 10 million in PEPL available. it's projected that when this runs out and is exhausted, that we'd have about 1.7. Can you talk just a little bit about the implications of us ending this round with the majority of those PEPAL funds drained, and what that means in terms of the need for another round of PEPAL to be approved, or are we looking at the necessity of needing to maintain property taxes at the current rate, or is it likely that we would be able to sustain more at that 1.7 level longer term, or do we really need to be more at that 10 million and drain down and then start back up at 10 million and drain down? Like, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and what voters should expect, and what we should expect that's going to look like long term?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to speak for the board on what their goals would be 10 years from now on extending a levy. But what I will say is that the need is there. So I think as our fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers and to our students and our staff is that the need's there. If we have the funds, we need to make sure that we're giving them spaces that is the most conducive learning environment possible. So if we have the funds, the need's there, we should be spending that money and reinvesting them back into our facilities.
Okay. And then my second question is around the SAVE fund. So just to clarify or confirm, those funds come with fees, interest related to the use of that. Is that accurate? Am I understanding that correctly?
I guess tell me
Only
more.
if you borrow against. Like, we can pull straight from SAVE as cash and pay for a project up front, but if you're going to do like the Performance Center or this building and it's multi-million dollars over a couple of years, then that's when we borrow against the SAVE revenue.
So I guess that's my question, is like how much of this plan is borrowed against versus just pulling directly?
Yep, perfect. So I can explain that pretty easily. So the second line item down that says less revenue bond payments, that would be loans, bond payments that we're making towards those bond issuances. Then the 3 lines below that, technology, anticipated capital projects, and transportation vehicles, that would all be cash flow.
So is there an estimate of what the additional costs would be for borrowing those funds?
Yeah, actually, so based on, that would be hard to project into the future, but at least on the bond payments that we make now, we know what our original principal is, and then we know what our total principal and interest payments are if nothing changes, meaning we don't refinance, we don't pay off early. So we could do that calculation, yeah.
Say, in my time on the board, both times that we've done that, we have refinanced once, and that saved us, what was it, like $3 million, Barry, in interest when we refinanced the one set of bonds. And when we approve the issuance of those, the calculation always tells us right up front what the interest is going to be on top of the principal. And when we compare those different options, when Matt Gillespie gives us those, he's very open and like, it's all written out for us, how much is principal, how much is interest. So if we were to move forward on anything that would require us to borrow against SAVE, those projections, when we're given the options on how to do that, that would all be right there for us to review before we make that decision. So we know everything up front.
The one other factor in that is when you're borrowing is what's the cost of construction, doing it now versus trying to save so you can cash flow a project, and does those interest payments, does that outweigh maybe what the increased cost of construction was for a future date, and then also throw in the need of that facility, you know, do you need it now or can you wait? So it's a financial equation and there's a cost there, yes, but you have some other factors that you also have to factor in when you're doing that.
Thank you, John. You've presented us and the incredible plan. We also have a lot of what ifs up here, and that is a hard thing to answer. What if in 10 years something, something, something? You've done your best to do that. We are blessed that you also have a background in construction as well as finance, so thank you very much for having a grasp of the larger picture for us. We're going to move on to item number 504, the Marion City Council report, please.
Really, so keeping with the theme of the public hearings about property tax, the bit of the agenda from the Marion City Council meeting on February 20th that I wanted to share with everyone is that they passed a resolution setting a public hearing for March 27th concerning proposed fiscal year 2026 property tax rate. This is just me making our community aware of that. And now I'm kicking myself because I'm sure the city of Cedar Rapids will have one as well, and I don't have that information, but. I'm sorry, when they have their hearing? Yeah.
March 6th.
Thank you. And Robbins. So if you are in those communities and interested in attending the city's public hearing for property tax rate, that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. At this time, we move on to item number 505, legislative report.
All right, 1 second. All right. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about a couple important dates for the legislative update. The first being one that was already mentioned today when Justin asked when SSA was supposed to be decided, that 30 days after the governor's speech, I believe, and that was February 13th. So that was the deadline that the state legislature set for itself to tell us what SSA was going to be so we could make some of these budget decisions. Obviously, that date has passed. That is unfortunate. As soon as they decide SSA, we will be able to update and budget accordingly. The second date that I wanted to bring up is March 7th. That is the first funnel deadline. So if a bill, with the exception of like the budget bills and some of the fiscal related ones, everything has to be passed out of a subcommittee, out of a committee, apologies, passed out of a committee by March 7th, or it's dead, unless they slip it into one of those fiscal bills later on. So just some important dates that I wanted to touch base on. I'm going to talk about a few bills briefly that will be good, that are good things. Good things. Okay? And all right, so first we'll start off with SSA. So the Senate's proposal is 2%. And again, this is supplemental student aid, which makes up the bulk of our general fund, the bulk of which we spend on teacher salaries. And when we negotiate salaries, we have to provide a 3% increase or CPI, whichever is lower. And so the 2% proposal in the Senate is below 3%, or I think it's about 2.5% is CPI right now. 2.9? Okay. And the House has put an amendment on that that would take it up to 2.25. There's some additional one-time appropriations that go along with that. For example, there is a flat $10 per pupil that would go towards the minimum state cost per pupil. There is a one-time appropriation that generally would provide about $47 per pupil. And just as a reminder, our per pupil cost from the state is about $7,600-ish. And so when I'm talking about $47 per pupil, $10 per pupil, it is on top of that base amount.
About 7,800.
Thank you, John. They also provided an increase in some operational sharing, student weighting. So all in all, they're trying to piece together something. We do appreciate the 2.25% and the supplemental things, but this is not a 5-year thing we can count on. This is only for the 1 year. So that is the SSA update. I'm going to go on to the teacher salary supplement fixes, which have to do with the changes to the new minimum salaries that were established two years ago. What? Last year, okay. So it provides the correct amount of that teacher salary supplement to districts in order to meet those newly established minimum salaries. So when they rolled this out last year, that wasn't quite as straightforward. This year, they're addressing and fixing that. Thank you. It is passed out of subcommittee. In addition, the bill that is correcting that is also reinstating the Teach Iowa website, and that has the online job postings for teachers. So in general, those two things are awesome. Another exciting thing that we're seeing at the legislature is adding robotics as an official activity, as an official sponsored activity. So wonderful STEM thing. Another one I want to highlight is dropout prevention. So they are, it allows for increasing the maximum modified supplement for dropout prevention programs to ultimately go from the current 2.5% to 5%, but only by 0.25% annually. So that's as much as it can grow each year. But the fact that they're raising this and giving us an ability to increase that funding towards those dropout prevention programs is appreciated as well. All right. So those were all the happy, positive ones. A couple that I'm just going to touch on for informative purposes. One is related to the bill regarding cell phone usage in school. Right now, the bill would mandate instruction in health classes for the impacts of social media usage in grades 6 through 8. And it would also require school boards to have a policy that would restrict usage during class instructional time. The one thing that I thought was great when I was digging through the language of this bill is it allows exceptions for like working with, it gives parents the ability to work with a school to make an exception for their student if their student would need to access their phone during that time for a reason that the school and the parent would agree on. It is also allow device usage for students that are on 504 or IEP plans. And so I really appreciated them considering those situations and how that might be challenging. Another one that I wanted to bring to folks' attention is there's a bill that would allow 8th graders to participate in high school sports as long as their educational performance is sufficient. I thought that was a very important thing that folks would want to be interested in. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about the state legislature has to do with the chronic absenteeism. Again, this is another bill that fixes some things that they did last year. Excuse me. The first is that it removes the certified mail requirement. So last year, if the district had a student that met the threshold for that absentee limit, they were required to send a certified mail, which costs money, and it was adding up and just logistically making things challenging. So it removes that specific certified mail requirement. There's still a notification piece, but it doesn't have to be through certified mail. Another thing I wanted to share is that it would allow for absences for attending weddings, funerals, and some military-related activities. Okay, that was a lot. There are pages upon pages upon pages of bills that are in the legislature right now. I tried to touch on a range of them. There's also some bills that would get down into the weeds affecting curriculum, but I think I'm going to call it there for now.
Everything that you talked about is still in committee, or nothing's been passed. So everything you talked about is still a potential and not a done deal, correct?
Correct. Yes, I only talked about things that have passed out of subcommittee, passed out of a committee, and in the case of SSA, it passed out of the Senate and is now in the House with an amendment. So yes, they're all still active. They're all active things. There's like dozens and dozens and dozens of bills that are education related but have no activity. For example, I did not mention anything about the change in start dates because that has not seen a lot of activity.
I have a quick question.
I will try to answer it.
The teacher salary fixes, is it just for this year? Or is it for the foreseeable future?
It is only for this fiscal year.
I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for your report. At this time, we will move on to item number 506, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. To start off with some district honors and highlights, we have a visual arts honor with congratulations goes out to Emma Larson for being recipient of the Gazette's Excellence in Arts Honor. Emma and other recipients will be honored at Theater Cedar Rapids on March 9th. A volunteer highlight, thanks to Jerry Burns for the 15 years he has volunteered in support of the Linn-Mar Robotics program. Thank you, Jerry. Student highlight, congratulations to Roe, Boulder Peak 5th grader, for being named the school and regional winner of the American Legion's What the Flag Means to Me essay contest. Academic honors, congratulations to 38 students who earned the Seal of Biliteracy, recognition for demonstrating proficiency in 2 or more languages by the time of their graduation. And some wrestling honors to our girls wrestlers. Congrats to the 27 ladies who participated in girls wrestling on a great season, and congratulations to the 5 that qualified for the state tournament. I also know that we had some great success over the weekend with the boys and with basketball, and we'll mention those highlights in an upcoming board meeting. Just a few meetings that are kind of highlights of my last couple of weeks. Anytime that we can engage with the city, whether it's the city manager, deputy city manager, public works, we really appreciative of our partnership. And we worked with them on different weather-related events, the tow ban that was in place there. We've had leadership in for various items, whether that's our lead learning sessions, our high school leadership to talk about the new performance auditorium. Got to stop a week ago Friday and have some fun at the high school and was a judge with their staff chili cook-off. We continue to meet with OPN. John and Melissa and I recently attended a conference in Ankeny called the Iowa Superintendent's Finance and Leadership Consortium, and the track that we took part in was around special education funding. So that was important for us to think about that topic as we continue to have a deficit in special education funding there. And last week I was able to attend the High School Festival of Orchestra event and boys basketball games. We also met recently with Grantwood AEA staff or leadership regarding our educational and media service selections for next school year. And as you think about past legislation, next year, our district will retain 100% of ed and media services dollars, and those dollars will not flow through directly to the AEA. That means the district receives $1 million. So we met with that team to determine, what items that we would still engage the AEA in, and that's an important conversation to have. If you remember last year, Ed Media Services is a component of that legislation where initially we had been sending, or for years we had been sending roughly $1 million to the AEA. That's part of that legislation that I just talked about. And then we also send roughly $3 million to the AEA as flow-through dollars for special education. And next year in July, we will send 90% of that fund and retain 10%. So our next subsequent conversations with the AEA will be around that 10% and what that looks like. And the state is also working on guidance for both the AEAs as well as the LEAs around that topic. Just some updates then regarding facilities projects. Our performance venue, if you haven't seen our website recently, we've provided some updates both with exterior and interior photos with the performance venue. So please go out to the district website if that interests you. You can get a sneak peek of what's happening inside the building. There's structural steel installation for the balcony happening, decking and detailing in the auditorium continues throughout this month. There's window installation underway. Restrooms in Area B is nearly complete, the framing at least. And they're still planning to switch over to that new electrical gear over spring break. And then, as I think Barry mentioned, during finance and audit, we continued to talk about indoor activities, but I'm going to back up just a little bit and reframe, where we've been recently with that indoor activities discussion. So back on February 12th, the board held a work session after the regular board meeting where OPN presented a timeline of facility improvements over the past 10 years and the current components of the indoor activities project, a floor plan, and renderings of the design. Athletic directors Tanya Moe and Chris Fechner were also with us that evening, and they spoke to the needs and uses of the design. John Galbraith, our CFO, talked about potential funding scenarios along with Matt Gillespie from Piper Sandler. Then on Monday, February 17th, we reconvened the Indoor Activities Stakeholder Committee, who had met last February and March, to come back to them and recap where we've been. They saw a very similar presentation to what the board had during their work session, gave them that history, that timeline, reminded them where we'd been as a committee, the benchmarking trips that we had done, and then shared schematic design with them and the renderings that you all saw. And they too were able to provide some feedback and some comments and things for us to think about. Fast forward then to last Thursday on February 20th, the Board Finance and Audit Committee met, and we discussed next steps there. As part of that, that included the Finance Audit Committee wanting the full board to see the presentation that John just delivered here tonight, which is sharing a detailed draft of a potential 10-year plan that could outline PEPL, SAVE, and PEARL expenditures and how this new project could fit in. And so from there, our next steps would include thinking about what communication efforts are happening next. So I've got Renee and Riley on the communications department working on a variety of things around the project, whether that's a web page that we can anchor back to or information like brochures and videos. But what we really think is a critical next step is going out and doing some Lion Learning sessions. So we take Lion Learning on the road, and we would have 3 open house meetings at the high school where we could not only show a presentation similar to what the board and the stakeholder group saw, but also take them personally on tours through the high school and talk to them about the pieces that they're seeing in the schematic design and showcase the need. Segueing away then from facilities, just upcoming events. This week we have 2 2-hour early dismissals for K-8 conferences, both on Tuesday and Thursday. And then on Friday we have no school. Staff is here for professional development. And before you know it, spring break will be upon us, March 17th through 21st. We're going to hit the end of the 3rd quarter on March 28th, and then we'll have no school with another professional development day on March 31st. With that, I'd take any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions at this time?
You mentioned the chili cook-off. Have you heard anything about the fish fry?
Oh, I might know what you're referring to, but no, I have not.
Okay. For context, Britt, can you?
The ag students grow tilapia, I think it's tilapia, they're fish, in the aquaponics program. And currently at the high school, there are, well, they might not be babies anymore because it's been a couple months since I was last in there, but they have full size and then they have baby or maybe teenage tilapia at this point. But at some point, late March, early April, they'll be ready to possibly have a fish fry with all of the fish they've learned how to grow in this really cool program that we have. I saw it for the first time my first year on the board, which was 6 years ago, and still every time I go to the ag room and I see the whole fish thing, I'm blown away by it. It's such a cool thing that our ag students are learning how to do. So, but yes, we grow fish in the high school. There's a whole bunch of them in there right now.
We grow fish and complimentary salads, so I'm thinking it might be fish and salad
The
there, or something like that.
The salad growing was phenomenal.
We should get to see strawberries this time around because they
Yes.
were they were going to harvest the lettuce before winter break, and then they
Serve
said they were going to
strawberries.
plant strawberries, and they have the the big stand with the growing the
Hydroponics?
hydroponics is the word I was looking for. But yes, they were growing lettuce at our last CTE advisory committee meeting in November. And then they said they were going to do strawberries next. So I said they should invite me when the strawberries are ready to eat because, you know, they're like $10 in the store right now, and I'd love to go eat some fresh strawberries at the high school. But yeah, it's cool. Fish, plants, all kinds of cool stuff happening in the ag department.
What's exciting is the CT meeting is 2 days from today, so we get to see what they're growing next, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll move on to item number 600, this unfinished business. We did not have anything listed. So that moves us on to item number 700, new businesses. Item number 701, approval to set public hearing.
Make a motion to set a public hearing for 6:30 PM on Monday, March 31st in the boardroom of the Educational Leadership Center regarding the proposed tax notices.
Second. Second.
I have Madat. Okay. Motion made by Justin and second by Madat. Do we have any discussion on this? If there's no discussion, may I have a vote, please? All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed, say no. The motion carries. Item number.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of policy recommendations for the proposed new policy 201.6-R, Board President and Vice President Elections Regulations, and the second half of the 800 series as presented in Exhibit 702.1.
Second.
We have a motion by Barry, a second by Melissa. Thank you.
I had made a pre-meeting request that the policy 201.6R be separated from the motion and discussed on its own.
Correct. So the part of our discussion is whether or not to separate these two motions, or this grouping of policies into two.
No, per policy, if a member makes that request, it is automatically done.
All right.
So Brett, you're requesting to have policy 201.6R pulled for a separate vote?
Correct.
We can do that.
Yep. Thank you.
We do have a motion on the table, though.
Correct. Is there any discussion to the motion on the table? We would be pulling new 201-6-R, correct? And so this would be moving the 800 series as presented in Exhibit 702.
That's not the motion that's on the table. The whole motion is on the table today.
Yes, but she just took that off.
But I made the motion.
Yeah.
I made the request prior to the meeting's beginning. It should have been stated prior to your motion. So if you could just amend your motion to either just now talk about 201.6R or to approve the 800 series separately, that would be appreciated.
So this is an opportunity for us to do the work as a board. It's to separate these two motions, or these two categories in at this time. For we have a new policy that is being proposed along with our updated policy on the 800 series. The motion originally was made by Barry and Melissa, a second by Melissa. Barry, you have the option to amend your motion, as Britt made this known to that she would want to have taken this, pulled this out prior to the original motion. So if you hadn't if she had been able to speak prior, we would not amend, but we are amending now. Are you amendable to amending your motion?
How about I just explain why, and then you can move forward.
Go ahead, Britt.
So with policy 201.6R, it is in our policy that we follow Robert's Rules of Order. And I have some issue with bullet point 4 and 5. Given the last two elections, where there have been multiple nominees, as written. No matter how many people would be nominated, if there's more than one, you would still have to move a motion for only one of them and proceed. Per Robert's Rules of Order, Section 4638, when there's more than one nominee to a given office, the candidates are voted on in the order in which they were nominated. When the nominations have ended, the chair repeats the nominations and continues. As soon as one nominee receives the majority vote, the chair declares them elected, and no votes are taken on the remaining nominees for that office. Robert's Rules goes on further in 46, Section 39. It will be seen that under the procedure just described, it is necessary for members wishing to vote for a later nominee to vote against an earlier one. This fact gives an undue advantage to earlier nominees, and accordingly, a voice vote is not a generally suitable method for electing the officers of organized societies. Per our additional policy in our rules of procedure, also in Robert's Rules, once a motion is made and voted on, if it does not pass, that same motion cannot be brought back in the same meeting. So if it doesn't receive a majority, the nomination is dead until a future meeting. So you would have to table. You couldn't re-nominate someone who has already been declined a vote, but you would force certain members, if they wanted to vote for someone else that they nominated, to vote no on the first nominee, as opposed to using a ballot election, which in back and forth conversation, Marion said our lawyer said is just fine as long as our names are included on our tally ballot vote and immediately disclosed. So the only exception to not voting on the same motion in the same meeting, again, Robert's Rule Section 38, a renewal of a motion is limited by the basic principle that an assembly cannot be asked to decide the same or substantially the same question twice in one session. The exception is a motion to rescind or renew, which is Section 38.5, which covers the limits on the motion. A main motion for the same amendment cannot be renewed at the same session unless there is a change in wording or circumstance sufficient to present substantially new questions, which then becomes technically a different motion. There is not a way to rephrase nominating someone for a leadership role, so that wouldn't count. In Section 37, it does say that you can do a motion to reconsider, but it would have to be made by someone who voted no. So for me, Section 4, if we listen to Robert's Rules, if multiple people are nominated, but then we're forced to go with the first person nominated and you either vote yes or no, anyone else who's nominated doesn't get the fairness of a vote unless we use a ballot, which is allowed under Robert's Rules and would fit under open meetings law as long as it's immediately read who voted how. So my request on this policy is that bullet 4 would be amended so that instead of using a roll call vote, we would distribute the president pro tem. If more than one nomination is made, the president pro tem would distribute a paper ballot. Each member would write their name and the name of the nominee they're voting for on the ballot. President pro tem would read off each vote and tally the votes. The president pro tem will then call for a motion for the person receiving the most votes. With a motion and a second, the president pro tem will move forward for a roll call vote to confirm the election. That is my suggestion because the current wording does not create a fair election process if there are more than one nominee for an office. And I know that was long-winded, but Robert's Rules is not anything short.
Thank you for your due diligence, and I appreciate your comments and your insights. And as always, it is greatly valued by this board. I'm going to continue our discussion and have the conversation, should this be referred back then to the policy committee and our lawyer, and make sure that we have, again, researched your, taken into greater detail your comments tonight, but also return this back to the policy committee. I'm open to, if that's, this is discussion time.
Amy, was that something that was discussed with our attorney as an option?
We're in the middle of discussions with the attorney right now on these questions.
Okay, thank you.
It's my understanding that this is a new policy even as far as our IASB goes. There's not currently an established policy, a model policy that IASB supplies.
That's why we're working with the attorney on it. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I do want to iterate, due diligence has been done, the policy committee, and also our lawyer has looked at this, and I want to thank Britt for her intentional looking into this as well. What is occurring right now is being more specific and having more guidelines, not just how to, like Britt said, Robert's Rules of Order has a lot more depth to it. We love all the words when we read Robert's Rules of Order. The question is, right now, we were trying to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and that's what was recommended, not as part of moving forward on this. Where we are at right now is we have a motion right now to take this policy as a first reading along with the 800 series as a first reading, and or we can ask Barry to amend this motion and pull new policy 201-C-R out. It does not mean, though, that we would vote then separately on these two motions. Is that correct?
Yes, you would vote my request prior to the meeting, which per policy would automatically remove and separate the motions, regardless of what's on the table.
So,
But we can vote to pass or not pass.
yes.
We can vote to table and send it back to policy. We can amend the policy based on opinion and send that through the first reading. There's lots of options. I just don't want to vote no to the rest of the policies. That's why I'm asking for the separation.
Okay, so my opinion moving forward is I will amend my motion reluctantly. I'm disappointed that we're having this discussion, so I will amend my motion to pull out policy 201.6-R. But I do want to bring that forward tonight for our first reading as well, because we need to keep moving forward on that. So I will amend that motion now.
We need a second.
I need a second to that amendment.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to amend that would separate the policy 201-6-R from a different vote from the 800 series. It was made by Barry and seconded by Melissa. Do we have any discussion?
Can we confirm which we are discussing first?
Excuse me?
So we're separating out,
Oh, yes, 201 would be first.
okay, so we're going to discuss 201.6 first. Okay.
No. My motion is to take that out. So we're going to, the motion we're going to have is
For
the
800.
800 series of 702.1.
Okay, so at this time, Barry is going to, we are moving forward. Are we all agreed on this?
Yes.
Our next step here would be to have a vote on the amendment of the motion, and then we will go into the approval of those as two separate motions.
Thank you for your guidance. It's a group effort here. So we will now vote to approve the amendment. May I please have all in favor of approving the amendment say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any noes? That motion carries. Boom. All right. Now, we are going to bring forward, do we do 201 first? Because it's listed in that direction?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, let's do new policy 201-6-R. I need a motion.
I would make a motion to either table or amend the language in policy 201.6R.
Can you clarify your motion, please?
I would move to table this policy and send it back to the policy committee for further review on the voice roll call vote on only one nominated person versus a ballot vote on all nominated individuals.
I will second.
Now discussion. I appreciate all this conversation, and I don't want anybody to feel silenced. I do want to share that the conversation began on February 2nd, I believe. So we've had time to see this and to deliberate on best steps. This is a motion or a policy that is, has the possibility, again, to come up for our regular review under the policy committee and make some of these changes and amendments. I do believe due diligence was made.
Just to clarify, I didn't come up with all of these questions today. I've been asking these questions for quite a while. And I am not in the belief of passing a policy only to fix it later. I believe that if you're going to pass a policy, you should pass the good policy first and not take the time to do it right the first time. I just have too many questions and too many concerns with the current wording.
I appreciate your insights again. I do want to say, though, that it was not done carelessly or effortlessly. So.
I don't think it was done carelessly or effortlessly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in its current form, I'm not a member of the policy committee. When I read the policy, when it was sent to us, I shared my concerns, and have gotten feedback from several people.
Just my comment is I personally don't like the idea of tabling it. I think we should move forward on the first reading, because it's very, very, very critical that this policy is put in force. It's very important to the well-being of our board to put this policy in force. So I just think it's very critical moving forward. So if there's any way we could, it's a first reading. It can be sent back to the policy committee to modify, and I think that would be more valuable to our board than to table it.
Just a reminder right now, the motion that is on the table right now is, I believe, that Britt put on the table, and it was second by Melissa by Laura to table this at this time. Is there any further discussion on that?
The only other discussion I would say would be that regardless of whether or not we table it or send it back to policy, we would have the time between now and our next meeting to get the additional feedback from the attorney and could make this modification. And so I actually really appreciate the change, and I would be in support of making this change as long as the attorney does approve of that. And so as a policy committee member, I would support moving forward with it, knowing that the intention would be to make the change as long as our attorney approves this as a legal option.
Can it be counted as passing a first reading if you change a significant chunk of the language between reading 1 and 2?
I'm going to let hold that question for just a moment, because the whole end of the line was all green down there before we came back to this side. Can I go ahead, and Justin and Laura?
I just caution us, I've heard multiple times here, if the attorney agrees to the policy. The attorneys don't make the policies. We make the policies. That was my only comment. Thank you.
So I wanted to speak, as I did second this motion to table, and admittedly, I am on the policy committee. So one might ask, Laura, what were you thinking? Why didn't you catch this sooner? And why are you changing your mind now to table it? At policy committee meeting and at subsequent questions and answers about this policy, the information I had at the time was that this was a good, sound policy, and that is the decision that I made to move forward with it and bringing it out of policy and to the full board with the information I had at the time. I think the points about the Roberts rules and the process and the ballot and the voice vote, information that I didn't have when this was in policy committee, and I appreciate. I'm still learning Roberts rules, and I'm trying. It's a big book. Thanks, I'll have to borrow that.
Laura.
I continue to educate myself as a board member, and I appreciate those who have more experience and more knowledge about these processes and procedures. With this new additional information, I want to be expedient with this policy because it is a very critical part, as Barry said, to our functioning and everything. But to me, this is a sound argument. It's a sound point. And we want to pass a good policy. We want to take the input from the lawyers and put our brains together to make a good decision. And yes, let's be expedient, but if we're still getting questions and answers and clarifications, I don't think it is responsible to pass the first reading.
Go ahead. I'm going to give you, go ahead and talk. Go ahead.
I agree with Laura. I'm still learning, and the points that Britt brought up, I wasn't aware of them. So thank you for bringing this up to the greater group. I would prefer to table it and take it back to the policy committee, and it would give our attorneys a chance to read and go through it. So that's where I stand right now.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order, just like other things, is a guiding tool, and as our lawyers have looked at this and have given us advice on how to move forward, so I don't want it to look like we never went that direction. The motion on the table at this time is to vote yes or no to tabling. You have the option to do that. Please keep in mind that this policy, there's a reason it stands out on its own, is to move us forward with other work of this board. And so, yes, critical as it is to get the words right and get everything, this specific policy is 1 page long, and has an R next to it as required. It is policy 2016-R, and it is to get us through the process of elections. So at this time, if we are adding to conversation, that would be lovely. I just want to say that what's on the table right now is to vote yes or no to table, excuse me, what's here right now is to table this yes or no. That means going back to the policy committee, back to our lawyer, and back. So, is there any further discussion on this motion right now to table new policy 201-6-R? If not, may I have, you're going to have to let me, because I cannot hear you from down here. If you want to vote yes to table, please turn your green light on and your microphone, please. If you would like to vote yes, please vote yes.
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 3. Is that correct? All those in favor of tabling, vote no.
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 1, 2, 3, 4. The no has it. We will not table new policy number 201-6-4.
Motion to amend policy 201.6-R per Britt's language suggestion under the 4th bullet.
Second.
So now we have a policy, we have on the table an amendment to the original passing of policy number 201-6-R. It is seconded, it was made by Laura, seconded by Britt. Now we have discussion on that motion, please.
Britt, could you reread your amendment, please?
If more than one nomination is made, the President Pro Tem will distribute paper ballots. Each member will write their name and the name of the nominee they are voting for on the ballot. The President Pro Tem will read off each vote, tallying the votes. The President Pro Tem will then call for a motion for the person receiving the most votes. With a motion and a second, the President Pro Tem will move for a roll call vote to confirm the election. That can be finessed by the committee. That was just my stab at trying to turn Robert's rules from 7 paragraphs into a couple sentences.
Is that the only change in the wording? Does the rest of the numbered items follow?
Yeah, my biggest concern was that if we nominate more than one person, that they should all get due process of voting and not just the first person who was nominated.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
More discussion? The other discussion, so now it is amended to, the concern would be that we have language in here that the policy committee has not had an opportunity to review. And so that would be a concern with just that's a lot of language to include without a review. And also, we talk about our lawyers. There's a reason the lawyers have been looking at policy number 201-6-R. So I just throwing that out on the conversation. It's a lot to amend in motion. What you're kind of back to is a first reading, changing it before the second reading.
And the second reading would be on March 31st would be our next board meeting, correct?
Which would give plenty of time for the committee to review this language and provide feedback before the second reading.
Correct.
So in essence, we're kind of back where we started. So we're going to approve a first reading of policy number 201-6-R. That would be, tonight you would be approving first reading. That's the motion I understand that's on the
No,
table.
with amended language. The motion is amended language.
Oh, yes, with the amended language. Thank you.
Yes.
I see no green lights. All right, all in favor of this amended motion on item number 201-6-R, please say yes, and please can I see your green lights?
Yes.
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 Are there any noes?
No.
Thank you very much. The motion does carry. We are now moving forward. I need a motion now to approve the 800 series as presented in Exhibit 702-1.
Motion to approve first reading of policy recommendations for the second half of 800 series as presented in 702.1.
Second.
We have a motion by Mahat and a second by Barry. Is there any discussion on the series 800 series as presented? If there is no discussion at this time, I'd ask you to vote yes by letting me see your green light, please. Yes.
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 Are there any noes? The motion carries.
Motion to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Melissa, second by Barry. Is there any discussion? If not, may I have a motion by saying yes? May I see your green lights?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Are there any opposed? The motion carries.
Motion to approve Dry Space Incorporated as the lowest responsible bidder for the Excelsior Middle School Roof Improvement Project for a total of $367,727.
We have a motion by Melissa. Is there a second?
Second.
Manhattan.
Discussion quick. As was brought up in the Finance Committee, the Finance team talked through this quite a bit here, and the bids came back lower than what we had originally budgeted and considered, so that's a win for everybody. In addition, this is putting on as Barry mentioned, a thicker than normal or a thicker roof membrane, which will give us a longer warranty for that. And again, this just kind of continues to come back to when the voters approve the added PEPL, we're able to make these longer term decisions that'll provide better value for our students and our taxpayers.
Thank you for that information. It's good to have good news on this bid, so thank you. Is there any further discussion? If I can see your mics, please, so I know voting yes. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed, say no. The motion carries.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have, Barry has made a motion, I believe it was second by Melissa, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? May I see your lights? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? The motion carries. All right, now we are on to board calendar and communications. I'm going to highlight a couple of items here if I can. March 6th, we have our board visit to Novak. It is at 8:30 in the morning. March 8th, we have the Linn-Mar Linn-Mar Foundation main event. It's going to be a big deal. If you have not gotten your tickets, please do. 6 o'clock, and reminder, it's at the DoubleTree by Hilton. March 11th, we have the Marion State of the City that is also at the DoubleTree at the Hilton. I think several of us are attending that meeting. Then you'll see March 12th has been struck out. That meeting has been moved to May, so we do not need to make a decision or put it on your calendars at this time. I want to move on to March 17th through the 21st, spring break. Yay. All right, moving down to March 31st, we have at 5 o'clock our Board of Directors regular meeting, and at 6:30 we have a special session. All right, everything's filled in. Wow. I mean, there you go. All right, we're moving on to item number 901. These are our committees and our advisories. 902. I need a motion on the
I'd
table.
like to make a motion to recommend disbanding the DEI committee until further notice.
Second.
Barry's made a motion and Justin has seconded this motion. Is there discussion? With your green lights, please, and we'll take turns. Oh, Nathan, please start. I'm sorry. This is your committee and sorry for that.
All right, good evening. On February 14th, 2025, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued a Dear Colleague letter stating the administration's interpretation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act impacting colleges, universities, and K-12 schools around the country. This Dear Colleague letter stated that schools that receive federal funding may not use race in decisions pertaining to any term or condition of employment or in any program, benefit, or opportunity afforded to students. The Dear Colleague letter further explains the administration's concern about programs that appear neutral on their face but may impermissibly use race as a consideration. They have stated that further guidance will be provided to clarify the position of the department in due course. We do not believe the work of the DEI committee has violated the rules of non-discrimination under Title VI and other applicable federal civil rights laws or the Iowa Civil Rights Act. However, we believe it is prudent to dissolve the board DEI committee until we receive further guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. This step will help ensure the district's non-discrimination obligations are carried out in a manner that complies with federal directives.
Thank you very much. Discussion?
So, as a former member of the D&I committee, I believe what Nathan just stated is very true. The work of the D&I committee does not violate the Dear Colleague letter. However, we will always follow the law. So, no matter how much I personally agree or disagree with this, I will have to follow what the law says.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I think it's really important for us to note that this letter is not law. This letter is guidance from the U.S. Department of Education based on an order that is actually in violation of federal law. And it's important for us to recognize and be able to distinguish the difference between orders, directives, and law. And we as a board when we first became board members, we took an oath to the Constitution, first and foremost. And when I look at the back of my nameplate and think about what is best for students, that is what we are here for. And we are here to protect our students, to protect our districts, and to comply with state and federal law. There is no law that we are breaking by having a committee that ensures equity and inclusion amongst our students. I personally have a really hard time with the concept of disbanding something that by doing the things that are in this order, we have the potential of actually violating the law by following the orders. An example would be if we truly one of the things that it says in this directive is to avoid any decisions based on race. So a student comes to us because they feel they've been discriminated against because of their race, that if it's followed to the T, that would prohibit us from being able to investigate that, that case, because that's a decision that we're making based on race. We have that's a federal civil rights law. We can't not follow federal civil rights laws. We have first and foremost, our responsibility is to follow existing laws, and there's no existing law that tells us to do these things or to not follow these other laws. And so for these reasons, and because I truly adamantly believe that it is what's best for our students, what's best for our district, I personally don't believe that I can vote for this.
Thank you very much. Is there any other further discussion? If not, I'd like to go ahead. Go ahead.
Two things. Until further notice is something that I'm reading and I think is pertinent to highlight. And based on the consequences that I have seen academic institutions bear, protecting students is very important. And if this means doing this until further notice might counterintuitively be a way we can actually protect our school and our students.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to agree with Laura that sometimes we fight the fights we want to fight by working within the system to get where we ultimately want to go. So it is with that intention in mind that I cast my vote for this tonight.
Same.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will vote on a recommendation to disband DEI committee until further notice. I need to see your microphones, please. So if you are voting yes, please have your green button on, please. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All those opposed?
Yeah.
Yes. I what? I mean, no.
No. Aye. No.
No. You have a 5-2. The motion carries. All right.
Motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:47 p.m.
Laura's made a
Second.
motion to adjourn. Britt has second. I want to see your green lights. Everybody say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? 6:48.